Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be looking at the science and the history of hypnosis. So the way I like to teach people, and the way I like to learn really, is to focus on what's the minimum effective dose of effort required to get the maximum results. And so it's the 80-20 rule, Pareto's law, other people refer to as, and that is that 20% of your effort can actually generate 80% of your results. What a lot of people do is they get caught up spending time on things that don't generate the big results. And so they're not making strategic decisions and they're not using their time strategically. And that is because people just don't know what they don't know. So what we want to do, and the way I like to train people, is that I'm going to teach you the bare minimum that you need to know very quickly to be able to get maximum results. Because I believe that you're not here just for training, you're here for the results. And so it's about getting out there and putting what you learn here into actions. Let's get into it. Now, let me ask you this. Can you, if the lights were out, if it was dark at home, do you know how to turn the lights on? You likely do, right? But how many of you know the science of why when you flick that switch, the lights come on? Probably not many of you. And in my experience, having trained over 9,000 people, what I've seen to be true is about, in a room of about 70 people, there's about maybe a dozen that do know the science, and the other sort of 60 odd people don't know the science, but they can all get the result. And so that's what we're really focused on, is showing you how to get results. Now, this course is not about showing you the science of hypnosis, because you can go read a book about that. What I'm really focusing on is teaching you the bare minimum so you know what to do when you're in front of someone and you can get a result. When someone's through a video call, what do you need to know to get a result? You don't need to know the science. The science is good to know. It's good to have that sort of confidence and that understanding, but you don't need to know the science. We'll go into a little bit. But look, I know plenty of people who are hypnosis nerds. And what I mean by that is they know the answers to every question about hypnosis. They've read every book they can get their hands on. They've done every course. But when they work with a client, they're weird, they're awkward, they're strange, they're clumsy with it, and it just doesn't work. But they are intellectually very intelligent and can answer all the questions. Just when it comes to the practical side of it, that they're not very good at it. And then I've met other people, and this is my training. I train people this way. People that don't necessarily always know the science, but they are absolutely gifted when it comes to getting someone a result. And so it's about you understanding, what do you want to be? Do you want to be the hypnosis nerd that's just going to collect information, or are you going to be someone that just focuses on results? Now, it's good to have information behind you, but you want to prioritize knowing the bare minimum that you need to know that's going to get the maximum return on the investment for both your time and your client's time. And so let me ask you, if you had an opportunity to work with a hypnosis nerd or someone who can get a result, which one would you choose? You'd probably choose the results, right? Like, I'm the same. I just want to get results. Show me someone that can get me a result. That's what I want to work with. I don't really care if you know all the answers to the questions that I've got, because if you can't get me a result, move out of my way. Let me find someone that can. And your client's going to be like that as well. So let's dive into the history of hypnosis. And this allows us to then certify you as a practitioner in hypnotherapy, just so you understand the background of it. So back in the 1740s, now there's evidence that in ancient Egyptian times, there were things called sleep temples, and even ancient Greek times, there were things called sleep temples. So they believe that this form of therapy was kind of being used back then, but it wasn't called hypnosis at all. Well, let's jump to the 1700s. And in the 1740s, there was a gentleman by the name of Father Maximilian Helm. And he was a Jesuit priest. And Father Maximilian Helm had this belief that there was magnetic fluid within our bodies. And it wasn't just his own belief. Many other people believed that at the time. And he would have a client come to him, and they would be have some sort of illness or some sort of problem. And he'd have them lay down on his bench, and he'd grab his magnetic rods and he'd wave his magnetic rods over the client's body. The client would have a healing convulsion and would get up from the table and would be healed. It's one of the first evidences of animal magnetism that we refer to. And so he was a Jesuit priest, and he was helping people. He didn't quite know what he was doing. He thought it was magnetic fluids. And then one day he went to heal someone, went to grab his magnetic rods, and someone had moved them. Now, fortunately, he made a good decision in that moment, and he just waved his hands over the client, and the client had the same response. They had a healing convulsion, got up from the table, and was healed. And so he realized, or at least he created a belief, that he must have the ability to transfer magnetic fluid from his hands into the client and vice versa. Now, Father Maximilian Hell was actually training an apprentice, and his apprentice's name was Franz Anton Mesmer. And so Mesmer was training under Father Maximilian Hell, got quite successful, was working with the royal family over in France, and started to work with some of the royal family to a point where he asked King Louis XVI to give him the title of the royal healer. King Louis XVI was a bit skeptical, wasn't too sure about this, and so asked Benjamin Franklin, who was an ambassador from the US at the time that was visiting, to investigate Mesmer. Now, if you've been healed by Mesmer, people in the local township would say that you had been mesmerized. And that's where the term mesmerized comes from Mesmer's work. Now, it was Benjamin Franklin's findings. He came back to King Louis XVI and said, well, even though we can see that Franz Anton Mesmer's clients get real results, because we cannot see any transference of fluid from his hands into the client, we deem he must be a fraud. And so at that point, the king's word is law. The king makes this aware. And guess what happened to Mesmer and all his credibility? He lost it all, and he ended up dying a lonely and poor man. As a result of this, this form of therapy went underground. Even Mesmer didn't know why he was doing it. Like he thought it was getting an impact for a reason that actually wasn't true. He was unaware it was his language. It was what he was saying to the clients that was getting the transformation, not his magical power of his hands. Then in the 1820s, James Braid started to research a lot of Mesmer's work. And James Braid is famous for creating the term hypnosis, which actually comes from the Greek word hypnos, which means sleep. And so James Braid invented the word hypnosis. He was going to call it neuropnology. And in fact, he wrote one of the first books, one of the very first books in sort of 1820s science, was trying to scientifically show people and teach people how to replicate this form of hypnosis. And as you can see, he was going to call it animal magnetism because it was being influenced by a lot of the influences from Mesmer's work as well. Fortunately, he changed it. I'm so glad he changed it from neuropnology, because it's really hard to say I'm a neuropnologist than it is to say hypnotherapist. He was kind of like one of the founding father of kind of modern day hypnotherapy. It's probably not that modern, but he started to create literature that then other people could follow. And then we had Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud is useful to understand because he did a little bit of damage to the hypnosis industry, but he started to get involved in it. And so in the 1890s, Sigmund Freud is a very famous psychoanalyst or psychologist, whatever label you want to give him, and he studied at the Nancy School of Hypnotherapy. Now, there were two sides to history here. One side of history says that Sigmund Freud was studying hypnotherapy, had a client under hypnosis. She jumped out of the seat, kissed him on the cheek, and then he kind of said, well, if she can kind of do that, then this stuff doesn't really work, and he moved away from hypnosis. Now, he also made it aware that in his belief that hypnosis didn't work, that meant a lot of people just believed him, and it went underground as a result. It lost a lot of credibility and following, because if Sigmund Freud says it doesn't work, well, then it mustn't work. Another side of history says that Sigmund Freud used to chew a lot of cocoa leaves for their medicinal purposes. He used to chew them so much that it would degrade his gums, and he used to speak with a slight slur. And as you'll find out through the hypnotic induction, our tonality does have some influence over the experience for our client. And so one other side of history says that Sigmund Freud was self-conscious about his slur and his tonality, so he moved away to a modality or a style of therapy that wasn't so reliant on his tone. Just depends on what you believe. Let's go to Estabrooks. So in the 1940s, Estabrooks is referred to as like the Rambo hypnotherapist. And he used an authoritarian approach. He'd go up to people and say, sleep, 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 and people would sleep. He's famous for being involved in the MK Ultra project. And the MK Ultra project was a project started by the CIA or the US government trying to create mind control soldiers. They spent millions of dollars trying to do it, over a decade of research, trying to create it, trying to get these results. And they ended up giving it away because they realized it just wasn't possible. So that's where kind of Estabrooks comes into it. If you've seen the movie Men Who Stare at Goats with George Clooney and Kevin Spacey, It's loosely based off the MK Ultra, where they try to create Jedi sort of soldiers. So it's interesting to go check that out, that movie, if you want to get a bit more of a comedic angle of it. And then we have Milton Erickson. So Milton Erickson is considered probably like one of the rock stars of hypnotherapy. He's like the Michael Jordan, the Tiger Woods, the Serena Williams of the hypnosis world. And the reason for that is because prior to Milton Erickson getting involved in hypnotherapy, when he was a teenager, he suffered from polio. And back then, if you suffered from polio, you were put in an iron lung and you couldn't move. It's like the tube with your head sticking out the end. And so all he could do was sit there and watch. Unfortunately, he watched his little sister start to crawl and walk and start to engage all her muscles. And as a result of just watching her day in, day out, he created unconsciously or accidentally, he created a acute form of senses. So he had a sensory acuity to a point where he could pick up on micro expressions and micro movements. And as a result, he was able to retrain some mobility back into his body. Now, that carried through into his adult life. And as he was also a doctor, he became a hypnotherapist or a therapist. And prior to him being a therapist, if you're performing therapy, what would happen is you would sit behind your client because they believed in transference. They believed that whatever problem the client has is going to come out their eyes and go forward. So I don't want to get what my client's got, so I'll sit behind them. Well, for Milton Erickson, that wasn't good enough because he couldn't see enough. And so Milton Erickson came up with the idea to set up seats at 60 degrees. Now, if you're performing hypnotherapy through video calls, obviously you can't do that. But traditional hypnotherapy, the basic concept is you set up your seats at 60 degrees, and that way you can see both hemispheres of the body as well as front and back of the body as well. So you can see breathing rates change. You can see expressions on the face. So when you are performing hypnotherapy through a video call, ideally try to set the video call up so you can see most of the client and you can see both their breathing change and ideally both hemispheres of their body. Now, Milton Erickson's also famous because not only did he change the way we performed hypnotherapy like that, but he was also masterful at telling therapeutic stories or metaphors. He would tell metaphors to clients, and often client would be unaware that they have just had therapy. They thought they were hearing some nice story. There's a famous example where Milton Erickson had a client that was an alcoholic, and the alcoholic sort of came to him, and Milton Erickson told him a quick little story, told him a story about a cactus and how a cactus thrives by drinking very little. And it can go for long periods of time without getting any liquid into it at all. And then asked the guy, do you still want to work with me? And the guy said yes. And so Milton Erickson sent him away to look at a cactus down at the botanical garden and then spend 10 minutes looking at that cactus and study it and then come back and see me. And that guy never came back. But then many years later, Milton Erickson ran into a woman and the woman's like, Milton Erickson, I want to thank you so much. Years ago, you worked with my father and he has not touched a drop of alcohol. He still is a bit weirded out to this day because he says you didn't perform therapy on him. You just told him some weird story. And Milton Erickson knew exactly what he did. He told him a therapeutic metaphor. And therapeutic metaphors are like an indirect way to influence people in a positive way that kind of plants a little seed of transformation in their unconscious mind and it lets it kind of germinate naturally from then on. And often the clients wholly believe that it was their transformation they created. And it is their creation. It is their transformation. They're the ones that nurtured it to blossom into whatever it ended up being. Just know that you as a practitioner can plant those seeds. So if you want to get very good at metaphors, Milton Erickson is the guy to model. And not only that, but Milton Erickson was a master of conversational hypnosis. Again, that's why he's considered the rock star in the hypnosis industry. He basically created conversational hypnosis, or what's also known on the internet as covert hypnosis. And then we have Dave Ellman. So Dave Ellman is also very famous, one of the founding fathers of modern hypnotherapy. In the 50s or late 40s and into the early 60s, Dave Ellman traveled around the US teaching doctors and dentists and many other people hypnosis. And so he made it really popular in the medical field. So he's very famous in the hypnosis world as a result of that. And then you have Krasner. So Krasner was the founding, I think, father of the American Hypnotherapy Association. And his style of hypnotherapy, which is the one I'm going to be teaching you today, is a linear style of hypnotherapy. There are 8 steps to it. Other people didn't quite have it so systemized. Milton Erickson's definitely not 8 steps. It's like just language patterns that are just ambiguous. You got to try and learn them all. Krasner's is a very easy style to get involved in. 8 steps, nice and easy. He's also written the book, The Wizard Within. It's a great book if you can get your hands on it. And so he's passed away now, but this is the style of hypnotherapy that you're going to be learning over the next few lessons. So here's a quick window into showing you how it all progresses. So down the bottom here, we've got Father Makes a Living in Hell in the 1740s. We could have gone a little bit deeper than that into Egyptian and ancient Greek times. You got James Braid here, who invented the word hypnosis. You've got Sigmund Freud up here in the 1890s. You've got Esther Brooks up here in the 1940s. You got Milton Erickson in the 1950s, Dave Ellman in the 60s, and then Krasner in the 80s.